I didn't believe in charisma at first. To me, leadership was about credentials, about titles, about who had the biggest office or the loudest voice. Until I met him. He wasn't tall. He didn't dress in expensive suits. He didn't speak louder than others. In fact, he barely spoke at all. But when he entered the room, everything changed. People shifted. Heads turned. The energy tightened. The atmosphere thickened with attention. I was in my mid-20s, sitting at a business conference that, quite honestly, I hadn't even wanted to attend. My boss forced me to come, claiming it would be good for my career. As I slumped into my chair with my cheap coffee, the doors opened. He walked in. No one introduced him yet. No spotlight, no microphone, no announcement. But the entire room leaned forward. I remember whispering to the person next to me. "Who is that?" "That's Richard," he said. "You'll see." The weight of presence. Richard didn't rush to the stage. He took his time walking through the crowd. People smiled at him as if they'd known him for years, even if they hadn't. He shook hands slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact just long enough to make you feel important, but not long enough to feel uncomfortable. Every interaction seemed personal, as if he was speaking directly to you, even in a room of hundreds. That was my first lesson in charisma, presence. Not being loud. Not being boastful. Not demanding attention. Presence is commanding attention without asking for it. What is charisma, really? For years after that moment, I became obsessed. Why did Richard have that effect? What was he doing that others weren't? Was it natural or learned? I dove into books, interviews, psychological studies. I shadowed leaders, observed public speakers, studied influencers. And I discovered something powerful. Charisma is not magic. It's not some mystical force you're born with. Charisma is a skill. A very deliberate, highly trainable set of behaviors, mindsets, and micro-actions that, when mastered, create an almost hypnotic influence over others. The 3 pillars of charisma. Through my research and personal transformation, I identified the 3 foundational pillars every charismatic leader masters. Keycap 1 presence, full attention in the moment. Keycap 2 power, projected confidence and certainty. Keycap 3 warmth, emotional connection and genuine care. When these 3 combine, the result is magnetic. Let's start with the first pillar, the one I saw Richard master that day, presence. Pillar 1, presence. Presence is rare in today's world. Most people are scattered, distracted, glued to their phones, lost in their thoughts. True presence feels like this. They look at you, and only you. They listen deeply. Their body language leans in. Their eyes don't dart around the room. They're fully invested in the moment. I later learned that Richard practiced something called active stillness. He centered his breathing before meetings. He cleared his mind of distractions. He committed to every interaction as if it was the only thing that existed. Presence tells people, you matter. You're seen. You're valued. And in return, people open up. They trust faster. They listen closer. They follow more willingly. Presence is a discipline, not a trait. I used to think presence was just something some people have. But then I began to practice daily meditation to build focus. Eye contact drills with colleagues, phone-free meetings, slower speech pacing, mental anchoring before conversations. It was uncomfortable at first. My mind would wander. My urge to check my phone would twitch. But slowly people noticed. You seem more grounded. You make people feel heard. There's something different about you. Presence is the foundation where all other aspects of charisma are built. Pillar 2, power. Power doesn't mean dominating. It means conveying certainty, confidence, security, capability. When Richard spoke that day, his voice was calm, steady, measured, not loud, not aggressive. But you believed him. Because certainty is contagious. People want to follow leaders who seem sure, not arrogant, but anchored. I later studied power signals, upright posture, controlled gestures, measured pauses, strong but relaxed eye contact, speaking in complete sentences, owning the space physically. When I practiced these, people began reacting differently to me. Meetings shifted. Negotiations tipped in my favor. My leadership presence grew. Pillar 3, warmth. This is where most ambitious people fail. They chase power and presence but forget warmth. Without warmth, charisma becomes intimidation. Warmth signals, I care about you. I'm safe to follow. Your success matters to me. Richard had this warmth. He remembered people's names. He asked about their families. He made people feel like collaborators, not pawns. Warmth comes from genuine curiosity, active listening, smiling with the eyes, not just the mouth. Subtle touch, a handshake, a hand on the shoulder. Small acts of service. When presence, power, and warmth merge, you become magnetic. Hashtag the charisma equation. I began to see charisma as a simple formula. Charisma equals presence plus power plus warmth. Each can be trained. Each can be strengthened. The mistake most people make is focusing on one while neglecting the others. All power, no warmth equals intimidating. All warmth, no power equals friendly but weak. All presence, no power or warmth equals mysterious but distant. Hashtag the internal game of charisma. Here's what shocked me the most. True charisma isn't about what others think of you. It's about what you believe about yourself. Charismatic people carry high self-worth, secure identity, emotional stability, clear purpose. They're not chasing approval. They're inviting alignment. When I worked on my inner world, my confidence, my emotional regulation, my mission, my external charisma rose automatically. Hashtag my first transformation moment. Months after studying Richard and applying what I learned, I was asked to lead my first major presentation. Normally, I would have panicked. But this time, I arrived early. I centered my breathing. I cleared my mind. I made eye contact. I spoke slowly. I stayed present. The room leaned in, just like they had for Richard. For the first time, I wasn't performing. I was leading. That's when I knew charisma can be built. Hashtag the road ahead. In this audiobook series, we're going deep. You will learn exactly how charismatic leaders control conversations, influence decisions, build trust rapidly, command rooms effortlessly, inspire loyalty, turn simple words into movements. You don't need to be born with it. You need to train for it. Because leadership in today's world isn't about titles. It's about the invisible magnetic pull you create through presence, power, and warmth. By the time I started deeply studying charisma, I had already witnessed it countless times. In business boardrooms, on political stages, in quiet one-on-one meetings, even in simple dinner conversations. There was always this same phenomenon. The entire room orbits around the charismatic one. But what exactly was happening beneath the surface? How were they controlling attention so effortlessly? How did they seem to shape people's emotions, decisions, and beliefs? Without force, without manipulation, and often without even trying. It wasn't random. It was deeply psychological. It was highly strategic. Today, you and I are going to peel back that curtain. You're going to see the invisible mechanics of how charismatic leaders control the room. Hashtag my first boardroom breakdown. Let me take you inside one of the most powerful moments where I first saw this play out in real time. We were in a high-stakes negotiation meeting. Two companies sitting across the table. Millions of dollars on the line. Tension was high. Everyone was defensive. And then she walked in. Her name was Angela. A rising star CEO known for her negotiation mastery. No fancy power moves. No aggressive tone. No rushed speeches. She simply sat down, smiled gently, made full eye contact with everyone, and said, "Before we dive in, I want to make sure we're all here to build something better, not just for us, but for everyone affected by this deal. The tension evaporated. And within 30 minutes, people who were prepared to fight were suddenly collaborating. Hashtag the first rule of room control. Emotional calibration. Angela knew something most leaders miss. People's emotional state determines how they hear your message. She calibrated the emotional temperature of the room before influencing it. If the room was tense, she softened it. If the room was scattered, she focused it. If the room was uncertain, she anchored it. The first power of charismatic leaders is emotional leadership. They feel the room before they lead the room. Emotional calibration tactics. Smile before speaking, disarms subconscious defenses. Pause before replying, creates safety and respect. Mirror micro-expressions, builds subconscious rapport. Acknowledge tension openly, removes invisible resistance. I know this is an important moment for all of us. Let's make sure we get to the best outcome together. Simple. Disarming. Magnetic. Hashtag the second rule of room control. Attention engineering. Every charismatic leader knows. Who controls attention, controls influence. In today's distracted world, attention is currency. The charismatic master doesn't fight for attention, they command it. How? Keycap 1. Controlled movement. Minimal, deliberate hand gestures. Movement only to emphasize key points. Avoids nervous pacing or fidgeting. Keycap 2. Vocal control. Changes volume strategically. Pauses before important statements. Speaks slightly slower than normal. Uses vocal variety, tone, pitch, rhythm. Keycap 3. Eye contact. Sequencing. Scans the room slowly. Holds brief eye contact with multiple people. Makes every individual feel included. When Angela spoke, her eyes would glide across the table, making each person feel directly involved. Hashtag the third rule. Framing reality. The most subtle and most powerful tool charismatic leaders use. They frame the narrative before anyone else can. Framing is how you define what the conversation means before it even begins. For example, is this meeting about competition or collaboration? Is this negotiation about fairness or dominance? Is this change about danger or opportunity? Whoever frames first usually wins. Angela started that meeting by framing. We're all here to build something better. She defined the emotional and logical lens through which everyone viewed the entire negotiation. Once that frame was accepted, resistance dropped. Hashtag the fourth rule. Certainty projection. Charismatic leaders project certainty even in uncertainty. Not arrogance. Not blind confidence. We may not have every answer yet, but I know we'll find the best solution together. Certainty creates safety. And safety opens minds to influence. I started practicing this myself, speaking in full sentences. Avoiding filler words like maybe, or hopefully. Owning my opinions. Expressing confidence in processes, not just outcomes. The more certainty I projected, the more authority I naturally gained. Hashtag the fifth rule. Status balancing. In every room, invisible status hierarchies exist. Charismatic leaders master the art of balancing two signals: high status. They project expertise, competence, and strength. High warmth. They remain approachable, relatable, and inclusive. This duality creates what psychologists call primal leadership safety. You are powerful, but you are safe. When people feel both, they instinctively trust and follow. Hashtag the status balancing techniques. Open body language, no crossed arms. Low, slow hand movements, calm control. Gentle smiles, warmth without submission. Elevated posture, quiet dominance. Vocal calm, zero need to prove status through volume. These are not accidents. They are practice behaviors. Hashtag the sixth rule. Language precision. Charismatic leaders speak with surgical precision. No rambling. No over-explaining. No justification for every statement. Instead, they speak simply. Use strong, visual language. Make key points easy to remember. Use metaphors and stories to make ideas sticky. When Angela explained complex financial structures, she said, "Think of this as building a bridge. The stronger our joint investment now, the more weight this partnership can carry for years to come." Visual. Simple. Memorable. Hashtag the seventh rule. Pattern interruption. Charisma often spikes when leaders break predictable patterns. For example, suddenly standing up mid-conversation, asking an unexpected question, telling a personal story at an unexpected moment, using well-timed humor. These pattern interruptions grab attention, re-engage the room, and refresh emotional energy. I learned to insert these interruptions intentionally, not randomly, to keep people engaged without feeling manipulated. Hashtag the unseen mental model behind all this. At the core, charismatic leaders operate with this belief. I am the emotional thermostat of this room. They set the tone. They regulate tension. They steer attention. They define reality. People instinctively crave this emotional leadership, because most people live in emotional uncertainty. When you can own the emotional tone, people feel drawn to your leadership without you ever needing to convince them. Hashtag the day I controlled my first room. I remember my first true test of these principles. A client presentation with multiple high-level executives. Normally, I would have talked too fast, over-explained, tried to sell hard. This time, I opened with a calm vision statement, paused before each key point, balanced eye contact, used visual metaphors, asked engaging questions mid-presentation, closed with clear, simple recommendations. When the meeting ended, the senior partner shook my hand and said, "You're someone I can trust to lead big rooms." That was my proof. Charisma isn't gifted. It's engineered. Hashtag the road ahead. Now you understand the psychological mechanics behind how charismatic leaders control any room. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into one of the most mysterious skills of all, silent strength. The power of presence, eye contact, and nonverbal command. Because long before you speak, your body already broadcasts who you are. Before you ever open your mouth, before you ever speak a word, before you deliver your first brilliant idea, you're already being judged. The room has already read you. And the people in that room have already made silent decisions about whether they respect you, whether they trust you, whether they'll follow you, whether they believe you have authority, all before your first sentence. That's because 90% of charisma is silent. It lives in your nonverbal signals, your body language, your posture, your eye contact, your breathing, your facial expressions, your energetic presence. I didn't fully understand this until I studied my first major mentor face-to-face. Hashtag the man who dominated without speaking. His name was Marcus. I was invited to observe one of his high-stakes leadership meetings. Marcus entered the boardroom and said nothing for nearly 90 seconds. No nervous handshake. No rushed greetings. No loud introduction. He simply stood near the head of the table, scanning the room quietly. And yet, the energy of the room locked fully onto him. Silent command. Every person unconsciously adjusted their posture. Every conversation paused. All eyes followed him. When he finally spoke, it was almost unnecessary, because the room was already in his frame of control. That was when I realized. Real power walks into the room long before your words do. Hashtag the science of silent strength. After that experience, I became obsessed with decoding what Marcus was doing. What I learned shocked me. Nonverbal communication accounts for over 70% of how we perceive authority and trust. It's processed by the limbic brain, the ancient part of our brain that reacts instantly, below conscious awareness. Before your words are heard, your energy is felt. Hashtag the nonverbal charisma framework. I broke Marcus' behavior down into 6 key nonverbal charisma drivers. Keycap 1 stillness, keycap 2 posture, keycap 3 eye contact, keycap 4 facial microexpressions, keycap 5 gesture precision, keycap 6 breath control. Let's break each one down. Keycap 1 hashtag stillness. The signal of power. Movement communicates emotional state. Nervous people fidget. Insecure people shift their weight. Anxious people tap their fingers, bounce knees, glance around. Powerful people remain still. Marcus stood like a rock, feet shoulder-width apart. Shoulders relaxed but upright. Hands resting lightly, either by his sides or lightly clasped. No shifting. No fidgeting. Stillness signals, I am comfortable here. I am not threatened. I control my state. Stillness creates gravity. People lean towards stillness because it feels stable. I began practicing stillness daily, standing in front of mirrors, recording my meetings, becoming hyper-aware of unconscious fidgeting. It was one of the most difficult and most powerful disciplines I ever built. Keycap 2 #posture. The foundation of presence. Your posture telegraphs everything about your internal state. Collapsed posture signals submission. Overly rigid posture signals insecurity. Open, upright, balanced posture signals confidence. The posture formula: chin level, not tilted down. Shoulders back but relaxed. Spine neutral, not arched or slouched. Feet planted firmly. Weight balanced evenly. Neck extended tall, like a string pulling from the crown of your head. Powerful posture doesn't just make you look stronger, it makes you feel stronger. There's science behind this. Amy Cuddy's Power Pose research showed that body posture directly influences your hormone levels: increased testosterone, dominance hormone; decreased cortisol, stress hormone. When I began deliberately holding power posture before important meetings, my anxiety dropped, and my verbal delivery improved naturally. Keycap 3 #eye contact. The trust trigger. Eye contact is one of the most misunderstood and most critical elements of charisma. Too little eye contact signals weakness or dishonesty. Too much eye contact signals aggression or creepiness. The right balance builds instant connection and authority. Marcus' eye contact formula was surgical. Held eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds per person. Maintained soft focus, not laser staring. Blinked naturally. Shifted gaze smoothly around the room. Matched eye contact intensity to emotional tone. Eye contact is not a stare down. It's an invitation. I see you. I'm engaged. You matter. In one-on-one conversations, Marcus would hold slightly longer eye contact, breaking periodically to create rhythm. I practiced this relentlessly. Eye contact drills in every interaction. Breaking the habit of glancing away during uncomfortable moments. Allowing silence to breathe while maintaining eye contact. Keycap 4 #facial microexpressions. The emotional display. Your face leaks your emotions constantly, often without you realizing. Charismatic leaders control their facial expressions intentionally. Subtle, controlled smiles. Relaxed brow. Softened jaw. Symmetrical expressions. Slight eyebrow raises to signal interest. Minimal twitching or tightening. One of Marcus' secrets was what I call the confident half smile. Slight upward curve of the lips. No forced grin. Signals calm, friendly confidence. This tiny adjustment shifted how people received his every word. Keycap 5 #gesture precision. The language of the body. Hands amplify your words, or destroy them. Wild hand movements signal loss of control. Locked, hidden hands signal nervousness. Charismatic leaders use open, deliberate, slow gestures, palms open when making inclusive points. Fingers steepling for emphasizing authority. Controlled pointing when directing attention. Smooth, symmetrical hand movements synchronized with speech. Marcus rarely moved his hands more than necessary. When he did, it was intentional. Like punctuation marks to his words. I filmed myself giving presentations and eliminated erratic hand gestures one by one. The result? Every word landed with more weight. Keycap 6 breath control. The anchor of calm breath exposes your internal state instantly. Shallow, fast breathing equals anxiety. Deep, slow breathing equals control. Before entering any important interaction, Marcus performed breath anchoring. 4 count inhale. 6 count exhale. Repeated for 60 seconds. This activated his parasympathetic nervous system, calming his heart rate and stabilizing his emotional state. I adopted this ritual myself, before every meeting, before every sales call, before every speech. Calm breath equals calm mind equals calm presence. Hashtag the silent strength sequence. I ultimately built my own pre-meeting ritual based on everything I observed. Keycap 1 posture check, shoulders back, chin level, spine tall. Keycap 2 breath anchoring, 5 deep, slow breaths. Keycap 3 facial relaxation, gentle smile, relaxed jaw. Keycap 4 eye contact warm up, practice connecting softly with eyes. Keycap 5 gesture control reminder, hands visible, deliberate, purposeful. With this simple ritual, I began to walk into rooms already radiating command, before saying a single word. The unspoken aura of authority. Here's the great secret. People feel your state before they hear your words. If you're calm, they become calm. If you're confident, they trust you. If you're steady, they follow you. This is why silent strength creates instant influence. You don't need to announce leadership, you embody it. Hashtag my first test of full silent strength. Months into my practice, I was scheduled to present to a group of skeptical investors. Normally, I would have rushed my opening, overcompensated with nervous energy, tried too hard to impress. This time, I entered the room slowly, made deliberate eye contact, sat with stillness, breathed calmly, held my posture, delivered my points with rhythm and space. The questions that followed were less hostile than expected. The closing conversation shifted into partnership offers. One of the lead investors said afterward, "You were the calmest person in that room. That gave me confidence in your leadership." Hashtag the silent strength formula. Silent strength equals stillness plus posture plus eye contact plus facial control plus gestures plus breath. Mastering this formula will instantly elevate your charisma, long before you ever speak. Charisma is first felt, then heard. Hashtag the road ahead. Now that you've unlocked the power of nonverbal command, we move next into one of the most powerful tools of all charismatic leaders, the art of storytelling. How charismatic leaders move minds. Because while silent strength earns attention, it's stories that shape beliefs. Storytelling is what holds it. In all my years of studying and observing charismatic leaders, one pattern kept appearing over and over. The most powerful leaders are master storytellers. Not because they tell fairy tales. Not because they're naturally gifted speakers. But because they understand something most people don't. The human brain is wired for stories. Stories bypass resistance. Stories implant ideas. Stories create emotional bonds. When you master storytelling, you no longer need to convince anyone, because people convince themselves. Hashtag my first exposure to leadership storytelling. It was another high-stakes business conference. The keynote speaker was not who I expected. He wasn't flashy. He didn't walk on stage like a celebrity. He simply walked out, smiled, and paused. The room fell silent. Then he said, "I want to tell you about the day my father lost everything." Instantly, we were pulled into his world. For the next 25 minutes he walked us through his father's business collapse. The lessons he learned as a teenager watching it happen. How those lessons shaped his leadership today. The key decisions that led to his current company's success. By the time he finished, not one person checked their phone. No one moved. You could feel the emotional connection in the air. He owned the room. Not through slides. Not through data. But through story. Hashtag why stories control the mind. The reason storytelling works isn't just psychological, it's biological. When you hear a story, your brain releases dopamine, emotional engagement, oxytocin, trust and bonding. Neurocoupling occurs, your brain syncs with the storytellers. Facts inform. Stories transform. When you simply share information, people analyze. When you tell a story, people experience. Experience beats information every time. Hashtag the leadership story formula. Through years of studying master storytellers, I discovered a repeatable structure that charismatic leaders use. Story arc. Keycap 1 hook. Capture attention immediately. Keycap 2 struggle. Describe a relatable challenge. Keycap 3 turning point. Share the key decision or moment of change. Keycap 4 resolution. Explain the outcome. Keycap 5 lesson. Deliver the takeaway that serves the audience. Let's break it down. Keycap 1 hashtag the hook. Capturing the brain, your opening line must snap attention. Examples. The doctor said I might not survive the night. 2 years ago, I nearly lost my entire business. Let me tell you about the time I almost gave up. Hooks work because they create curiosity, tension, immediate emotional engagement. Keycap 2 hashtag the struggle. Building connection, the struggle humanizes you. Share vulnerability. Expose real fears, failures, doubts. I was broke. My confidence shattered. I questioned everything I thought I knew. When leaders share struggle, audiences relate. If they overcame that, maybe I can too. Struggle creates emotional investment. Keycap 3 the turning point. Creating hope. This is where the shift happens. The decision. The realization. The pivot. That's when I realized I wasn't failing. I was learning. Turning points inject hope, one of the most powerful emotional anchors. Keycap 4 hashtag the resolution. Showing possibility here, you reveal how things turned out. Today, that tiny business now employs 200 people across 4 countries. Resolution shows your authority, not as a flawless expert, but as someone who earned their wisdom. Keycap 5 hashtag the lesson. Delivering value, and every story with a lesson that serves your audience. That's why today, I teach every new leader, you don't grow when things are easy. You grow when you learn how to lead through chaos. This cements your credibility while adding value. Hashtag the storytelling delivery secrets beyond structure. Delivery matters enormously. Pace. Slow down during key emotional beats. Pause. Let tension breathe. Tone. Match emotional intensity. Facial expression. Let your face reflect your emotions. Eye contact. Hold steady during critical points. Gesture. Use hands to visually map the story. Hashtag the internal storytelling mindset. The most powerful storytellers operate from one belief. This story is not about me, it's about serving them. They share not to impress, but to connect. Not to glorify, but to transfer wisdom. Hashtag the story bank practice. I started building what I call my story bank. Every time something significant happened in my business or life, a failure, a lesson, a win, a client story, I wrote it down. Short story, 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Medium story, 3 to 5 minutes. Signature story, 10 to 20 minutes. Over time, my story bank grew into a powerful arsenal. Sales calls, keynotes, investor pitches, team leadership talks, client onboarding. At any moment, I could pull the perfect story for the audience, the emotion, and the outcome I needed. Hashtag why storytelling magnifies charisma. Stories achieve what logic cannot. They bypass skepticism. They implant beliefs without argument. They build emotional loyalty. They differentiate you from data-driven robots. Charismatic leaders don't compete on data. They compete on meaning. And meaning is created through story. Hashtag the day I closed my first 7-figure deal was story. During one of my biggest pitches, instead of diving into the numbers, I opened with, "Let me tell you how I nearly went bankrupt 3 years ago." I shared the mistakes I made, the hard lessons learned, the systems I built afterward, the results those systems now produce for my clients. By the time I finished, the negotiation shifted from skepticism to trust. From, "Can you deliver?" to, "How fast can we start?" I closed that deal faster than I ever imagined. Because people buy into the leader before they buy into the offer. Hashtag the final word on storytelling. Facts tell. Stories sell. Data explains. Stories persuade. Charismatic leaders master storytelling because they understand influence flows through emotion, not information. # the road ahead. Now that you've unlocked the art of storytelling, we're ready for one of the deepest charisma drivers, the emotional intelligence code, mastering emotions and reading others. Because true charisma isn't just about how you feel, it's about how you make others feel. By this point in my journey, I had learned how presence captured attention. I had mastered nonverbal strength. I was building stories that moved minds. But something was still missing. In many rooms, I could control the environment. Yet sometimes, deals still slipped away. Relationships still broke down. Teams still misaligned. That's when I discovered the layer beneath all charisma: emotional intelligence, EQ. Charisma without emotional intelligence is manipulation. Charisma with emotional intelligence is leadership. This is the part most charisma courses don't teach. But every truly magnetic leader lives and breathes it. Today, we'll unlock that emotional code together. # my emotional intelligence breakdown moment. It happened during a high-stakes negotiation. I was presenting my carefully crafted offer. The product was solid. The value was undeniable. The data was irrefutable. Yet, the decision-maker sat stone-faced. I pressed harder, logically explaining why this made perfect sense. The more facts I laid out, the colder the room became. Eventually, he leaned forward and said quietly, "I don't feel like you understand where we are right now." That single sentence shattered my overconfidence. He wasn't rejecting the offer. He was rejecting me, because I had failed to connect emotionally. That was my wake-up call. Leadership is not a battle of logic. Leadership is the mastery of emotional landscapes. # what emotional intelligence actually is. Most people define EQ too narrowly. It's being nice. It's about empathy. That's incomplete. Here's how I came to define it after years of study. Emotional intelligence is the ability to accurately read, regulate, and respond to emotions, both in yourself and others, to create productive outcomes. It has 5 key domains. Keycap 1 self-awareness, Keycap 2 self-regulation, Keycap 3 motivation, Keycap 4 empathy, Keycap 5 social skill. Let's unpack each one. Keycap 1 # self-awareness. The foundation of leadership. Before you can read others, you must read yourself. What am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling it? How is it affecting my behavior? When leaders lack self-awareness, they project insecurity. They react emotionally. They confuse their teams. They sabotage trust. I learned to conduct daily emotional audits. What triggered me today? Where did I react instead of respond? What patterns do I keep repeating? Where am I leaking power emotionally? The more I understood my own emotional landscape, the more steady my leadership became. Keycap 2 # self-regulation. The power of emotional control. Feel everything. Display selectively. Self-regulation isn't suppression. It's emotional management. Staying calm under pressure. Delaying reactive responses. Maintaining composure in chaos. Controlling nonverbal leakage. Charismatic leaders regulate emotions like expert pilots regulate altitude, constant minor adjustments. Avoiding overcorrection. Staying level through turbulence. I practice breath work, mindfulness, and trigger awareness daily. If you cannot regulate your own state, you cannot lead other states. Keycap 3 # motivation. The inner drive. High EQ leaders are driven from within, not by external validation. They pursue purpose over applause. They embrace long-term gains over short-term dopamine. They bounce back faster from setbacks. Their emotional drive is anchored to mission, not mood. When my motivation shifted from prove them wrong to serve them better, my entire presence softened. And my leadership multiplied. Mission-centered motivation creates magnetic conviction. Keycap 4 # empathy. The rare skill of leaders. Empathy is not weakness. It's strategic leadership power. Can I see the world through their lens, not just mine? Empathy allows you to understand unspoken fears. Anticipate objections before they surface. Design offers that feel tailor-made. diffuse tension before it escalates. I built a habit of asking, what matters most to them right now? What might they fear? What unspoken pressure are they carrying? What's their win here? This habit made negotiations smoother, teams more loyal, and clients more committed. Keycap 5 # social skill. The application layer. This is where emotional intelligence translates into influence. Reading the room's emotional temperature. Redirecting tension with humor. Framing feedback constructively. Diffusing conflict without escalation. Building alliances organically. Social skill is the art of emotional navigation. I practiced noticing micro-reactions in meetings, adjusting tone mid-conversation, using questions instead of statements to draw people in, matching energy levels without mirroring negativity. The emotional feedback loop. I discovered a simple formula that governed every high-stakes conversation. State, perception, decision. My emotional state shaped their perception of me, which shaped their decision-making toward me. By mastering my state, I began controlling rooms without force. The invisible trust factor. At the core of emotional intelligence is this truth. People decide who to trust based on how they feel in your presence. Do you make them feel seen? Do you make them feel safe? Do you make them feel respected? Do you make them feel hopeful? When people feel these things, they follow naturally. You don't pull people toward you, you create gravity they can't resist. The day emotional intelligence saved the deal. Months after my painful negotiation failure, I entered a similar high-stakes deal. This time, I didn't lead with facts. I opened with, before we dive into numbers, I want to acknowledge how much pressure you're under managing growth during such uncertain market shifts. The tension softened immediately. They leaned in. I asked more questions than I presented. I reflected their concerns back to them. I positioned my offer as their solution, not my sale. By the end, not only was the deal closed, they offered to introduce me to 2 more major clients. Because people don't buy when they understand you. They buy when they feel understood by you. The emotional intelligence practice framework to build your EQ charisma. Adopt this daily practice. Keycap 1 morning emotional check-in. What state am I starting in? What emotions need to be managed today? Keycap 2 pre-meeting emotional mapping. What might others be feeling right now? What unspoken pressures exist in the room? Keycap 3 active listening triggers. Watch for micro-signals, posture shifts, eye aversion, vocal tone changes. Keycap 4 evening reflection. Where did I respond well emotionally today? Where did I react poorly? What patterns am I noticing? Why most leaders fail at emotional intelligence. They fear vulnerability. They rush to logic. They crave control. They confuse empathy with weakness. They focus on their own agenda over others' emotions. Millionaire leaders invert this. Control your state. Read their state. Align your message to their state. The final word on emotional intelligence. Charisma without EQ is hollow. It may sparkle, but it rarely lasts. When emotional intelligence anchors your presence, you don't just control the room, you guide hearts, minds, and futures. The road ahead. Now that you've unlocked emotional intelligence, we move next into one of the most misunderstood charisma drivers, the confidence illusion, how they project unshakable certainty. Because charisma isn't about always being right, it's about being confidently certain, even while navigating uncertainty. There's a moment, and you've seen it, when a charismatic leader steps forward, speaks, and everyone listens. They might not have every answer. They may even be entering a completely unknown situation. But still, they project something magnetic, certainty. It's not arrogance. It's not recklessness. It's not fake bravado. It's the illusion of unshakable confidence. The kind of confidence that says, "We'll figure this out. Follow me." Today, I'll take you inside one of the most important, and most trainable, charisma secrets, the confidence illusion. The day my own confidence cracked. I was leading one of my first high-stakes business expansions. New market. Unknown competitors. Uncertain data. The board was watching. My team was watching. Investors were on edge. And inside, I was terrified. But I had studied enough charismatic leaders by that point to know how you feel is far less important than how you transmit. I stood up, took a deep breath, and said, "We've identified challenges. But I have full confidence in our team's capacity to solve these. And here's how we'll approach it. No guarantees. No false certainty. But absolute conviction in process." The room settled. Investors nodded. The team followed. That was the first time I fully projected confidence before I possessed it internally. #the truth about confidence. Most people misunderstand confidence completely. They believe it's a permanent state. They believe it requires certainty of outcome. They believe you must fully feel it to transmit it. Wrong. Charismatic leaders operate from a different belief. Confidence is a behavior, not a feeling. You can act with confidence while still navigating doubt internally. Confidence is the posture you hold in uncertainty. Confidence is how you move while solving. Confidence is transmitted through controlled behavior, not perfect knowledge. Why the illusion works. The reason this works is rooted in psychology. Humans crave stability in others, especially in leaders. When people feel uncertain, they instinctively scan for emotional anchors. Whoever displays the most controlled, certain energy becomes that anchor. That anchor is often chosen long before facts are processed. Certainty is contagious. It's emotional leadership at its core. #the confidence illusion formula. Through years of studying leaders who mastered this, I identified the formula. Calm plus clarity plus conviction plus consistency equals confidence illusion. Let's break them down. Keycap 1 #calm. The emotional base. Panic destroys perceived authority instantly. Even if your mind races, your body must remain still, steady, controlled in breath, measured in movement. The leader who breathes slow commands fast. Calmness is the foundation because it signals emotional mastery. It allows you to think clearly. It stabilizes the group's energy. I practice breath anchoring before every high-stakes meeting. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold 2 seconds. Exhale 6 seconds. Repeat 3 to 5 times. Keycap 2 #clarity. The message control. Uncertainty grows in the absence of clarity. Speak simply. Use decisive language. Eliminate. Maybe, hopefully, I think. Break complex situations into simple steps. For example, instead of, "We hope to address the issues soon," say, "We've identified 3 key issues and are executing solutions as we speak." Clarity reduces ambiguity. Ambiguity breeds fear. Fear erodes charisma. Keycap 3 conviction. The internal alignment. Conviction is not about being right. It's about being committed to progress. Even when outcomes are uncertain, charismatic leaders transmit belief in the team, belief in the process, belief in their own capacity to adapt. We don't control every variable, but we control how we respond. Conviction is where power lives. I may not know the outcome, but I know we will find a solution. Keycap for #consistency. The pattern. People trust inconsistency breeds doubt. One day excited, next day panicked. One meeting optimistic, next meeting defeated. Charismatic leaders display emotional consistency, steady tone, steady pace, steady vision, steady message. People trust consistency more than perfection. Consistency allows others to borrow your certainty while their own wavers. How confidence is transmitted nonverbally. Much of confidence lives in nonverbal transmission. Eye contact, direct but not aggressive. Posture, open, upright, balanced. Hand gestures, controlled, slow, open-palmed. Pacing, slightly slower. Speech conveys control. Facial expression, relaxed brow, subtle smile, steady eyes. I recorded my meetings obsessively, eliminating nervous tics one by one. The inner dialogue shift. At the root of confidence illusion is this internal conversation. Old version. What if I fail? What if they think I'm wrong? New version. I trust my preparation. I trust my adaptability. I trust my ability to figure it out. Confidence doesn't require perfection. It requires trust and resilience. Hashtag the stability anchor. Technique. I developed a technique for myself called the stability anchor. Before any meeting, I anchor 3 unshakable truths. Keycap 1 purpose. Why I'm leading this. Keycap 2 process. The next clear step I control. Keycap 3 people. The team or client I serve. No matter how uncertain the situation, these anchors stabilize my presence. Hashtag the confidence perception loop. Here's where it gets powerful. When you project confidence, others treat you as competent. Their response reinforces your internal confidence. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. You don't wait to feel confident. You behave confidently. And confidence grows. Hashtag the day I fully owned the confidence illusion in a major investor pitch. I faced intense, skeptical questioning. They challenged projections. They questioned assumptions. They tested my leadership posture. Instead of defensiveness, I remained calm. Those are valid concerns. Here's how we're mitigating risk. And here's why our adaptive model remains strong under multiple market scenarios. I maintained eye contact, steady breath, unrushed pacing, consistent framing. The more composed I remained, the more the room softened. By the end, you clearly know how to lead through volatility. We're in. Hashtag why most people struggle with confidence. They confuse confidence with knowledge. They wait for perfect certainty. They fear judgment. They seek external validation first. Millionaire leaders reverse this. I will not be perfect, but I will be steady. Hashtag the final word on the confidence illusion. True charisma isn't about eliminating fear. It's about mastering your display under fear. Calm plus clarity plus conviction plus consistency equals magnetic confidence. This is how charismatic leaders transmit authority long before certainty arrives. Hashtag the road ahead. Now that you've mastered confidence projection, we move next into the heart of verbal charisma, the language of influence, words, pacing, and framing secrets. Because the words you choose and how you deliver them are your ultimate tools for shaping minds. By the time I had learned how to control my presence, read emotions, and project confidence, I thought I had unlocked most of what made a leader charismatic. But I was missing one more layer, the mastery of language. Because words aren't just words. Words shape reality. He who controls the language controls the conversation. He who controls the conversation controls the outcome. Today, you and I will go deep into the mechanics of verbal charisma, how charismatic leaders use words, pacing, and framing to influence without force. Hashtag my language breakthrough moment. It was a deal I was dangerously close to losing. The client loved our product but kept hesitating. No matter how many facts I shared, they wouldn't close. Finally, my mentor pulled me aside and said, "You keep trying to sell the facts. Start selling the future." The next meeting I shifted. Instead of presenting another spreadsheet, I said, "Imagine 3 months from now when your entire team is finally free from chasing broken processes. Picture your operations running smoothly while you focus on growth again." The energy shifted instantly. They weren't thinking about features anymore. They were experiencing their desired future. 2 days later, they signed. Hashtag the core truth of verbal influence. Facts tell. Emotion sells. Framing closes. Words aren't meant to impress. Words are meant to move minds into action. Hashtag the verbal charisma framework. After years of study, I broke it into 5 key elements. Keycap 1 clarity of language, Keycap 2 pacing and pausing, Keycap 3 visual framing, Keycap 4 positive command phrasing, Keycap 5 authority through simplicity, Keycap 1 hashtag clarity of language. The elimination of confusion. Charismatic leaders speak with crystal clarity. No jargon. No over-explaining. No technical flexing. They simplify without dumbing down. For example, cross mark. We've developed a comprehensive multi-layer operational synergy model. White heavy check mark. We've built a simple system that eliminates daily bottlenecks. Clarity builds trust. When people fully understand, they relax. When they relax, they become open to influence. Key cap 2. Pacing and pausing. The rhythmic control of attention. Your pace is your control mechanism. Speak too fast, nervous. Speak too slow, uncertain. Speak rhythmically, authoritative. Charismatic pacing formula. Opening. Slightly slower, deliberate. Key points. Slow down even more. Transitions, brief pauses. Closing, controlled build-up, but never rushed. Pauses are your secret weapon. They create space for your words to land. They draw listeners inward. They project supreme control. I trained with deliberate, power pauses, 2 to 3 seconds after important sentences, letting silence do some of the work. Keycap 3. Visual framing. Speaking to the mind's eye. The most powerful words trigger pictures. Imagine your team walking into a Monday morning where every issue from last week is already solved. Picture your clients smiling as they experience the smooth rollout you promised. Visual language activates the listener's brain, engages emotional centers, lowers skepticism, drives ownership of the outcome. I started replacing abstract phrases with vivid imagery. Cross mark. Improve operational efficiency. White heavy check mark. Free your managers from the daily 3-hour scramble that burns them out. Specific. Visual. Memorable. Keycap 4. Positive command phrasing. Guiding action subconsciously. Charismatic leaders avoid vague asks. Instead, they use positive, actionable phrasing that directs behavior confidently. Here's the next step. What you'll notice first is, you'll find this makes your team's work easier immediately. Let's move forward with the onboarding schedule. Notice, no. Hopefully. No. If you want. No weak, uncertain phrasing. People respond to leaders who speak with directional certainty. Language that assumes cooperation invites cooperation. Keycap 5. Authority through simplicity. The power of elegant speech. Complex language often masks insecurity. Charismatic leaders use short sentences, strong verbs, minimal filler words, elimination of, kind of, sort of, maybe. For example, cross mark. I think we should maybe look at possibly testing this. White heavy check mark. Let's test this approach next week. Simplicity feels stronger. The brain processes simple statements as more truthful, a phenomenon known as cognitive fluency. The framing effect. Shaping beliefs before opposition forms. Perhaps the most powerful language skill charismatic leaders wield is framing. The person who frames the situation first often controls the entire conversation. Frame risks as opportunities. Frame obstacles as normal stages. Frame collaboration as shared mission. For example, every business in your position hits this scaling friction point. The teams who win are those who systematize now before growth accelerates. That's exactly what will help you do. You've normalized the struggle. Positioned your offer as the obvious solution. Lowered emotional resistance. Verbal confidence anchors. Charismatic leaders sprinkle phrases that anchor certainty. What we've seen repeatedly is, based on similar projects, we know, the proven path here is, even when outcomes aren't fully guaranteed, this language reinforces confidence in process and expertise. The verbal gravitas. Practice. I developed a daily exercise called verbal gravitas. Take complex ideas and practice reducing them to one-sentence punchlines. Speak those lines slowly out loud. Film and review to eliminate filler. Practice pauses after every key phrase. Over months, my language sharpened. Meetings became crisper. Clients leaned in faster. Negotiations closed smoother. The day language sealed the biggest partnership of my career. I was presenting to a room of skeptical executives. They had heard pitches before. Instead of overloading them with slides, I began. You're not looking for another vendor. You're looking for certainty. You want to know that 6 months from now, your team is calm, your systems are stable, and your customers are thanking you. That's what we build. The tension shifted. They weren't buying a product. They were buying the story I allowed them to see. That deal became one of the most profitable partnerships I've ever built. Hashtag why most people fail at verbal influence. They try to sound smart instead of being clear. They ramble due to nervousness. They fear silence. They overload with data. They seek approval instead of guiding decisions. Millionaire-level leaders reverse this. I don't speak to inform. I speak to move. Hashtag the final word on language of influence. Words create frames. Frames create beliefs. Beliefs drive decisions. Charisma flows not from what you know, but how you deliver what matters. Hashtag the road ahead. Now that you've unlocked verbal mastery, we move next into one of the most elite charisma tools, the social dynamics playbook: status, dominance, warmth, and authority. Because the unspoken power plays in every interaction determine who rises and who follows. Charisma isn't just personal. It's deeply social. Every time you walk into a room, whether you realize it or not, 1,000 invisible dynamics begin to unfold: status positioning, unspoken dominance battles, displays of warmth, silent negotiations of authority. Charismatic leaders master these social currents effortlessly. They don't overpower. They don't manipulate. They don't submit. They position themselves precisely where people instinctively follow. Today, we unlock the invisible mechanics of how charismatic leaders dominate the unspoken game, the social dynamics playbook. Hashtag my first encounter with social dominance. I was invited to a private dinner with several powerful entrepreneurs. Net worths far above mine. Reputation leagues ahead. Authority in the room already tilted heavily. As I entered, I instinctively felt the hierarchy. I began to shrink, speaking less, nodding too much, laughing at weak jokes, avoiding eye contact when challenged. Halfway through the evening, I realized charisma is not about having the most status. It's about behaving as if you belong at the table. The most respected leaders weren't forcing attention. They were calm, engaged, and completely secure, regardless of who else was present. From that day forward, I studied the science behind their social mastery. Hashtag the 4 power axes of social charisma. Every room operates across these 4 invisible axes. Keycap 1 status, where you sit in the hierarchy. Keycap 2 dominance, your ability to assert influence. Keycap 3 warmth, your ability to create connection. Keycap 4 authority, your earned right to lead. Charismatic leaders balance these perfectly. Let's break each one down. Keycap 1 hashtag status. The perceived social hierarchy. Status isn't about your title. It's about how people perceive your importance relative to them. Status signals include how others react to your presence, how much airtime you're given, whose opinions defer to yours, who moves to accommodate you physically. High status behaviors: speaking when you have something to say, not to fill silence. Maintaining calm, open posture. Allowing others to speak first, but always controlling your entry into conversation. Not reacting defensively to challenges. High status individuals don't fight for status. They occupy it naturally. Keycap 2 hashtag dominance. Your ability to direct outcomes. Dominance isn't aggression. It's the ability to set direction, frame discussions, hold boundaries, maintain control of your own emotional state. Dominant behaviors include clear, decisive language, direct but respectful eye contact, calm disagreement when necessary, owning your physical space without encroaching. True dominance makes others feel safe under your leadership. It says, "You can relax. I've got this under control." Keycap 3 hashtag warmth. The invitation to connection. Too much dominance without warmth creates fear. Too much warmth without dominance creates weakness. Charisma lives in the blend. Warmth behaviors include smiling with your eyes, asking genuinely curious questions, remembering personal details, active listening, leaning slightly forward when others speak, using names naturally in conversation, offering credit freely to others. Warmth lowers defenses. It turns status into attraction. People don't just respect you, they want to support you. Keycap 4 #authority. The earned right to be followed authority comes from value demonstrated over time. While status can be perceived instantly, authority builds through demonstrated competence, through delivering consistent results, through handling crises calmly, through knowledge others seek. Authority behaviors include teaching without condescension, providing solutions, not just pointing out problems, answering challenges with data, not defensiveness, remaining calm when others escalate emotionally. Authority cements your position as the natural leader. #the social dynamics sequence when entering any new room or interaction. Charismatic leaders often follow this unspoken sequence. Keycap 1 Observe first. Read the existing power map. Keycap 2 Anchor calm presence. Project internal security. Keycap 3 Initiate light warmth. Build safe, low resistance connection. Keycap 4 Demonstrate value. Insert subtle authority through insight. Keycap 5 Hold boundaries. Establish unshakable emotional control. By the time they speak on serious matters, the room is already leaning toward their frame. #the frame control principle. The entire game of social dynamics revolves around frame control. Who defines how reality is perceived? Charismatic leaders hold frames such as, "We're allies, not adversaries. This challenge is solvable. I have unique insights here. We're all here to create value." Weak leaders adopt the frames of others. Strong leaders shape them subtly. #micro behaviors that signal leadership. In my training, I drilled small behaviors that radically shifted how others perceived me. Never breaking eye contact first when making key points. Speaking second when asked for input, demonstrating thoughtfulness. Smiling while disagreeing, disarming opposition without yielding. Allowing silence to breathe after difficult statements, owning the room's tension. Standing slightly offset to the group leader, signaling alignment while retaining presence. #the dominance warmth ratio. Every room requires a different blend. High-risk negotiations, 70% dominance/30% warmth. Team leadership meetings, 50-50 balance. Client onboarding, 40% dominance/60% warmth. Public speaking, 60% dominance/40% warmth. Charismatic leaders adjust this blend instinctively based on context. It's not one size fits all. It's adaptive social calibration. #the night I fully controlled the room. In one of my most difficult leadership moments, 2 key stakeholders were on the verge of public conflict. Instead of playing mediator, I employed full social dynamics control, held calm, open posture, used their names deliberately, framed both of their concerns as valid contributions, shifted language from problem to solution opportunities, guided both parties into collaborative positioning without taking sides. The tension dissolved. The deal survived. My authority multiplied. The room followed me, not because I commanded, but because I anchored emotional safety while directing frames. #why most leaders fail at social dynamics. They confuse dominance with aggression. They mistake warmth for people-pleasing. They seek approval rather than position. They avoid tension instead of guiding it. They fail to adapt based on the room's current dynamic. Millionaire-level leaders operate differently. I don't overpower. I align, absorb, and redirect. #the final word on social dynamics. Charisma isn't about being the loudest. It's about becoming the unspoken center of gravity. Social dynamics mastery allows you to lead any room, without ever forcing it. The road ahead. Now that you've unlocked the external mastery of social dynamics, we move next into the internal system that fuels charismatic leadership daily, building charisma daily, habits, routines, and mind reprogramming. Because true charisma isn't a skill you turn on, it's a way of being you live. At this point, you've seen behind the curtain. The presence, the influence, the language, the emotional control, the social dominance. You've learned how charismatic leaders operate in the moments that count. But here's the secret most never see. Charisma isn't something these leaders turn on. It's something they've programmed into who they are. Charisma is not performance. It's calibration. They've trained their minds, bodies, and habits daily, so when the high-stakes moment arrives, it's not forced. It's natural. Today, we go deep into the daily architecture of charismatic mastery. Because if you don't install the right systems, you'll always rely on adrenaline instead of identity. #the day I realized my old habits were sabotaging my presence early in my leadership career. I noticed a disturbing pattern. Some days I was sharp, magnetic, powerful. Other days I was anxious, scattered, off balance. Same skill set. Same knowledge. Same meetings. The difference wasn't my ability. It was my internal state when I entered the room. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your preparation. From that moment, I committed to designing a life that sustained charisma, not occasionally, but daily. #the 3 pillars of daily charisma mastery lives on 3 foundational pillars. Keycap 1 internal state conditioning, Keycap 2 daily skill sharpening, Keycap 3 environmental engineering. Let's break them down. Keycap 1 internal state conditioning. The emotional engine, your ability to project leadership energy, starts with how you manage yourself. State drives presence. Presence drives influence. Morning state calibration, breath work. 3 to 5 minutes deep breathing upon waking. Visualization. Seeing yourself calmly leading key interactions of the day. Gratitude scan. 3 quick acknowledgments of what's already strong in your life. Mental rehearsal. Pre-framing difficult conversations you'll face. Physical anchors, strength training 3-5x/week. Builds hormonal confidence, testosterone, dopamine. Cold exposure or contrast showers. Sharpens nervous system resilience. Mobility practice. Keeps posture strong, presence open. Nutritional stability, high protein. Balanced meals to stabilize blood sugar. Hydration minimum. 3 liters/day. 0 alcohol or sugar before high pressure events. Physical resilience equals emotional resilience. Keycap 2 daily skill sharpening. The tools of influence, charisma decays when not actively sharpened. Mastery is rented daily, never owned permanently. Verbal drills, 5 minutes of clear sentence practice every morning. Record and review your tone, pacing, filler words. Practice pausing. Let silence breathe after key points. Nonverbal mirror work, 3 minutes of posture drills, shoulders back, neck tall, hands open. Practice holding steady eye contact with your own reflection. Half smile practice. Relaxed, controlled, approachable facial expression. Micro storytelling reps every day. Log 1 short story from your life or business. Practice condensing each story into 60-second punchlines. Build your story bank, ready to pull from in real conversations. Emotional check-ins before every major interaction. Ask, what is my state? What do they need emotionally right now? What outcome am I guiding toward? Preparation sharpens spontaneity. Keycap 3 environmental engineering. The invisible support system. You cannot consistently project charisma in chaotic, reactive environments. Elite leaders control the conditions that control them. Information diet, 0 random news scrolling. Curated feeds, mentors, strategic thinkers, industry data. No reactive social media before high-stakes meetings. Social circle calibration. Surround yourself with emotionally intelligent, driven, stable individuals. Eliminate chronic complainers and drama magnets. Build a private charisma peer group for feedback and refinement. Energy management time. Block your highest leverage interactions during your personal energy peaks. Protect deep work windows for strategic thinking. Schedule intentional downtime for mental reset. Your environment feeds your state before you ever enter the room. The mental reprogramming shift. Perhaps the deepest charisma upgrade lives not in your actions, but in your beliefs. I installed these core beliefs into my operating system. I belong in every room I enter. My value comes from service, not performance. Calm is my superpower. Silence is my ally. My words land because they serve. I lead with stability, not certainty. These affirmations aren't empty slogans. They became mental software, running automatically as I entered any leadership space. Hashtag the compound effect of daily charisma practice. When I first started, the difference was subtle. Meetings became smoother. Negotiations started tilting my way. People lingered after conversations, wanting more. But over months and years, my network multiplied. My leadership reputation deepened. My confidence stabilized. My influence became effortless. Because charisma compounds invisibly when installed daily. Small reps stack into unstoppable presence. Hashtag the night I felt charisma fully embodied at a private leadership retreat. I was unexpectedly asked to moderate a volatile panel. Big egos. Conflicting interests. High emotional stakes. Without preparation, I controlled my breath. Held steady eye contact. Reframed conflict into shared goals. Kept language simple, calm, visual. Managed tension with humor and empathy. When the panel ended, the organizer whispered, "You didn't just moderate. You controlled the entire energy of the room." That was the moment I fully understood. Charisma is not a trick. It's a state of being you prepare for daily. Hashtag why most people never install charisma permanently. They seek quick hacks instead of systems. They wait for confidence rather than build it. They avoid the small daily disciplines. They underestimate how much internal stability drives external influence. Millionaire leaders operate differently. I am my own laboratory. Every day, I upgrade my system. Hashtag the final word on daily charisma building. You don't rise to leadership moments. You fall to the level of your daily preparation. Build the habits. Install the system. Charisma will follow you naturally into every room you enter. Hashtag the road ahead. Now that you've built the daily internal system, we enter the final level of charismatic leadership. Legacy charisma. How the great leaders leave lasting impact. Because true charisma isn't measured while you speak, it's measured by what remains long after you leave. When I first started studying charisma, I was obsessed with the moments, the meeting, the presentation, the negotiation, the pitch. I thought that was where leadership lived. I thought that was where charisma mattered. But over the years, I came to realize, true charismatic leadership is not judged by the moments you're present. It's judged by the impact that continues after you're gone. This is the highest level of charisma. Legacy charisma. The ability to lead in such a way that people keep growing when you're no longer leading them directly. Decisions you influenced keep producing value years later. Cultures you shaped continue thriving beyond your involvement. Your name triggers respect long after you've left the room. Charisma that echoes. Today, we enter this final, most powerful layer. Hashtag the first time I witnessed legacy charisma. It was years after I'd left my first leadership role. I returned to visit the company I helped scale. What shocked me was not just how much bigger the company had grown, but how many of the systems, language, and leadership principles I had introduced were still alive. Leaders I mentored were mentoring others. Teams still quoted frameworks I had taught. The culture of calm, confident decision-making was intact. I was no longer present. But my leadership DNA remained active. That's when I understood, legacy charisma is not what people think of you. It's what people continue to do because of you. Hashtag the 3 levels of charismatic leadership. Over years of observation, I've come to see charisma in 3 levels. Keycap 1 Performance Charisma, Keycap 2 Leadership Charisma, Keycap 3 Legacy Charisma, Keycap 1 Hashtag Performance Charisma. The lowest level excites in the moment. Wins short-term attention. Often built on entertainment or surface charm. Fades quickly once the leader leaves. Flashy but fragile. Keycap 2 Leadership Charisma. The powerful middle level builds loyalty during your leadership. Inspires teams. Produces measurable results while present. Dependent on your continued involvement. Strong but limited to your direct energy. Keycap 3 Hashtag Legacy Charisma. The elite level embeds your leadership principles into people. Creates self-sustaining systems. Grows independently after you step away. echoes through generations. Rare. Permanent. Transformational. Hashtag the core pillars of legacy charisma. I've identified 5 pillars that separate legacy builders from performers. Keycap 1 Principle Imprinting, Keycap 2 Reputation Engineering, Keycap 3 Cultural Coding, Keycap 4 Mentor Multiplication, Keycap 5 Vision Embedding, Keycap 1 Hashtag Principle Imprinting. Teaching thinking. Not just rules. Legacy leaders don't just give people what to do. They teach how to think, how to approach problems, how to make decisions independently. They leave behind decision frameworks, mental models, leadership philosophies. You become the voice in people's heads long after you stop speaking. Example frameworks I left behind. Pause, then decide. Calm first, strategy second. People over process, until process protects people. These principles allowed my teams to navigate challenges years after I stepped away. Keycap 2 Hashtag Reputation Engineering. The brand of your name becomes a brand long after you're present. When people hear your name, what behaviors activate in their minds? Legacy leaders honor their word ruthlessly, handle conflict with integrity, serve without ego, speak truth even when inconvenient. Your reputation becomes a social asset that outlives your physical presence. Keycap 3 Hashtag Cultural Coding. Designing the leadership environment. Legacy charisma codes culture by establishing clear values, rewarding behaviors that reinforce the mission, designing rituals that anchor identity. At one company, we built simple but powerful rituals: weekly wins and lessons, meetings, calm under pressure, awards, transparent decision review boards. Years later, these rituals still guided behavior, even under entirely new leadership. Culture outlives leaders. Culture is the shadow of legacy charisma. Keycap 4 Hashtag Mentor Multiplication. Duplicating leadership DNA. Legacy leaders don't hoard influence. They multiply it. They mentor rising leaders intentionally, create succession pathways, empower others to lead independently, build leaders who build more leaders. The greatest compliment to your charisma is watching your students become better than you. I invested heavily in building generational leadership chains, ensuring my best ments could develop others without my ongoing input. Keycap 5 Hashtag Vision Embedding. Leaving the North Star. Legacy charisma leaves behind a compelling, unifying mission that transcends personalities. This is why we exist. This is who we serve. This is what winning looks like. When the vision is clear and emotionally embedded, alignment persists. Decision-making stays consistent. Loyalty remains high. Culture polices itself. Without this, organizations drift or collapse once the founder exits. Hashtag the day I fully saw my legacy activate. Years after stepping away from one company, I was invited back as a guest speaker. The team was bigger. The leaders were mostly new. The market had shifted dramatically. And yet, the language was familiar. The decision frameworks intact. The energy steady. One young manager, whom I had never met, shook my hand afterward and said, "Your frameworks make my job easier every day. Thank you for building them." That was my proof. Charisma fully absorbed. Legacy fully alive. Hashtag why most leaders never achieve legacy charisma. They crave personal credit over long-term systems. They fear losing control. They fail to codify their principles. They build dependence rather than independence. Millionaire-level leaders operate differently. I build so well that I become unnecessary. Hashtag the legacy charisma operating mindset. To operate at this level, adopt these beliefs. I measure leadership by what continues without me. My greatest work is building people who no longer need me. Simplicity sustains. Complexity collapses. I leave fingerprints on systems, not just signatures on contracts. Hashtag the final word on legacy charisma. Charisma is not fully proven while you lead. It is fully revealed in what outlives you. Build systems. Build leaders. Build culture. Build vision. When you master legacy charisma, your influence compounds long after your voice has gone silent. Hashtag the full circle. You've now traveled the entire journey of charismatic mastery. Presence, nonverbal command, storytelling, emotional intelligence, confidence, projection, language of influence, social dynamics, daily practice, legacy, impact. Charisma is not a mystery. Charisma is a system. Charisma is built.